Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my March wrap up for you guys, and I feel like I got to a lot of really good books in March. Last month was such a good reading month, like literally everything I gave a 5 stars to, and then this month it's all 4s and 5 stars, which is amazing, and it makes me so happy that I've just read so many good books. Like there hasn't been a single dud. So I read 7 books in March, which is really good, and I loved all of them. So we're just gonna get into it because I am very excited to talk about all of these. So the first book that I want to talk about is something so exciting. I'm so glad that I finally read this book and watched the movie, and that is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I watched the movie towards the end of February, I think, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's now my favorite Ghibli movie. Used to be Totoro, but I think now it's Howl's Moving Castle. I've seen it like 3 times since I watched it first, just because I love it that much. It's so good. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I just loved it so much. It's actually very similar to the movie until it isn't. Like the first couple of chapters I was like, okay, yeah, it's like I'm watching the movie, and then it's just like diverging off into like I don't even know. Very interesting to see how it was different from the movie though. The main difference that I personally noticed was in the way that Sophie and Howl were written. In the book they are a lot more flawed as characters. In the book Sophie literally does not take shit from anybody, and I respect her for that. But overall, the writing was just so whimsical. It's so fun. Literally, my new favorite word is slapdash. I've never heard it before until I read it in this book. You got a lot more character background, especially on Howl, which I appreciate because he's kind of like just this enigma in the movie, and you kind of see things about him, but you just get so much more in the book, obviously, and I just really appreciated that. And just overall, I loved this book so much, and I would definitely read it again. It was just such a good time, and I'm so glad that I read this book in spring especially. I feel like it's a really good read for spring. So this next book, yeah, I decided to start a reread of The Infernal Devices again. I don't think I'm going to reread Clockwork Princess after I finish Clockwork Prince, which I'm in the middle of right now. This is just such a comfort series for me now, and I really needed that in March, so I decided to reread the first and second books just because they bring me so much joy. I love them so much. I mean, they also bring me a lot of sadness, but I think the joy of just being back in this world again overshadows the sadness that this series will inevitably bring me. So it's okay. Yeah, this is like the 4th time I've read this book. I literally will not talk about it for too long. I promise. I just want this story to be so ingrained in my head, but I still feel like every time I read it, I see new things, and I love it so much. So obviously I got a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read, I do not have a physical copy of because I borrowed it from the library, but I read Sappho, her works, I suppose you could call them. I first read some of Sappho's poetry in this Greek lyric poetry book that I was reading for my Greek lit class, and there's just like a couple of pages dedicated to her work because she doesn't have a lot, because a lot of it got destroyed like over time and stuff, but what I read in here I really liked. And then I found like a book solely full of these snippets of her poetry in the library one day, and I decided to pick it up, and I'm really glad I did. It was really good, and it was really short, and it was very easy to like digest. The thing that I really enjoyed about her poetry style is that it's very blunt and literally the opposite of flowery writing. Like I don't think there's a single word in her work that doesn't need to be there, and I just loved that so much. The only problem is I don't know how to rate this book, because I enjoyed it a lot, but it was so short, and it was like, how do you rate poetry? I don't know. So I'm just leaving it without a rating, but I did really enjoy it. So the next book that I read is Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I picked this one for my Try a Chapter video. If you want to go check it out, I'll link it, but you don't have to. But I ended up really enjoying this, and I'm just really happy that I decided to continue this book. I randomly found it in the library one day when I was picking out books for my Try a Chapter video, and I was originally not planning on picking this one. I was like, oh, I've seen this before, probably won't pick it, but maybe I should try a chapter from it because it's like an Alice in Wonderland retelling, even though it's like, now that I've read it, it's not, but like it kind of is. I won't tell you what it is in case you haven't read it because it's a pretty big spoiler, so it's kind of hard to talk about because if you know the plot of the book, then you know what the ending of the book is gonna be. And it was not the ending of this book. It made me so upset. So I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I honestly like devoured this story. I think I read it in the span of like 2 days. Like I put off all of my homework. I had a test the next day, but I was like, what if I continued to read? So I did that instead. I still got a B on my test, so it was all good. I think the main part of why I liked this book so much was the love interest, Jest. He was honestly just everything I personally look for in a male lead. He's witty. He's kind of annoying, but like in a flirty way. He's got dark hair. I mean, honestly, what else could you ask for? I loved him. It was a tad insta-lovey in a way, but honestly, I'm willing to overlook that just because I was thoroughly entertained through the whole book. I really enjoyed my time reading this. It was a very whimsical story, obviously, because it is set in Wonderland, so if it wasn't whimsical, I'd be a little concerned. And in some aspects, that kind of impacted the plot because there were some things that happened, and I was like, that doesn't make sense. But like, since it's set in Wonderland, it makes sense that it doesn't make sense. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. And I feel like I need to read the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer because I really enjoyed this book, so I want to check out some more of her work. And I never read them when I was in middle school, which I feel like is prime time for the Lunar Chronicles, and I was very aware of them in middle school, but I just never read them. The next book I read is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I literally never get to new releases in the month that they're released. But for once, I finally did it. Can we all have a round of applause for me? Yes, thank you. I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars as well. I love stories like this. It reminds me a lot of the Cassidy Blake series, which I also love that series. Perfect, like, darker vibes. I think this would have been perfect to read in like September or October, just in like a spookier time, because the mansion that our main character goes to stay at in this book is very gothic. There's a lot of like descriptions of how this mansion looks, and just the general plot of this garden gate being the dividing line between two different dimensions almost is, I love stuff like that. The next book I read is actually my crowning achievement of the month, and that's because I read a classic, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I loved this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I'm very glad that I decided to try another book by Jane Austen because the first one I read didn't go so well, but I loved this one so much. It did take me more brain cells than a normal book would, but I think it was definitely worth it. I'm so glad that I finally read the book. I've seen the movie a couple of times, but now that I've read the book, I feel like I truly know the story. Like, the book is a lot better than the adaptation, but I still really enjoyed the 2005 one. I need to watch some others for sure, but the only one I've seen is the 2005 one, and the vibes of that movie are just immaculate. So obviously I had to pick up the book, and this was on my 2022 TBR, so I got to mark another one off of my TBR, so I'm still very proud of myself, yes. I loved Lizzie as our main character, and I was also pleasantly surprised to find that this book was really funny. Not in like laughing out loud kind of funny, but like me snorting every other page kind of funny. I just really enjoyed the dry wit and humor that Jane Austen uses throughout this book. If you have not read Jane Austen and you want to, might I recommend you start with Pride and Prejudice. It's rather short, it's pretty easy to understand, and I really enjoyed it. So moving on to the last book that I read this month. I finished this yesterday, 2 days ago, and that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. I just love that that rhymes so much. But I'm very happy that I decided to read this book this month. Originally, I was gonna wait until the summer to continue this because I read like 3 pages a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't feeling it, so I set it down, but a couple of days ago, I just decided, yeah, it's time for Throne of Glass. And I'm really glad that I did read this. I gave this one a 3.75 out of 5 stars, and because it wasn't quite at a 4-star, like I wouldn't say this is gonna be like a new favorite series, but I did still generally really enjoy reading this book. I really enjoyed the plot, and I loved the descriptions of the glass castle, but the main character, Selena, is not my favorite main character. She's not bad, but I do find her to be kind of annoying. What's going on with the love interests in this book? Is there a love triangle? I'd literally never heard of there being a love triangle in this book. Granted, I don't know that much about it, but I feel like that usually comes out when people are talking about things. But if you would like to know, I think I prefer Kale over Dorian, in my personal opinion. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, also let me know down below what your favorite book that you read this month was, or if you are feeling shady, what is your least favorite book that you read this month? And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.